Hi, Zizaran here with another Diablo 4 video. I've now finished all that early access has to offer. I've played all the characters, I've done all the content, except the butcher. Never found him.
Wait, there's no corner this time.
But I've done the world boss, etc. and had a lot of fun. And I wanted to make a video about everything that the first weekend had to offer. There is a second one coming soon that'll also include the Necro and the Druid, and I'm looking forward to that. But one thing I found really crazy was how everyone is talking with certainty about Diablo, even though we've only had access to level 25. People are talking as if we've already seen everything, and while we can only talk about what we've experienced so far, a lot just remains to be seen. So let's talk about what we have seen so far, what concerns I have, and what I hope is different in the full version of the game. So first, I'm going to cover the good points. Monster abilities, for the most part, are incredibly well telegraphed and easy to see. They're like very clear, good animations, there's like wind up, etc. There were some exceptions to this in abilities, and that is in conjunction with your own abilities. For example, sometimes your own ability, for example Blizzard, can obfuscate something like a on-death animation. Personally, I'm not a big fan of on-death animations in-game. Generally, I like it that when I've killed the monster is dead. And I'm not a big fan of like, okay, well 4 seconds afterwards, it's gonna detonate and one-shot my character. That's just a mechanic I've never been a big fan of. Some people are, and that's great. However, one thing isn't the best telegraphed, or it's not that it's badly telegraphed, but auto attacks are very different than what I'm used to from some other games. So auto attacks in this almost seem inevitable, where they're like very, like the monster's auto attacks are very snippy, and it kind of feels like it's sort of inevitable damage. For example, in Path of Exile or other games like Dark Souls, as long as you're like good at dodging, etc., it is like, you know, just running at an angle, you generally won't get hit. Whereas there's so much speed and stuff that the auto attacks are just a lot more unavoidable. One thing that's really good about Diablo 4 is that it's so easy to respec. So it's easy to figure out what abilities are good, how do they work in combination with others, and you do have free respecs up to level 15. This could probably be further, even as low as like 25 or 30, so that just early on in your character's development, you can freely pick and choose. But honestly, even when the respec does start costing something, it was pretty cheap anyway. The only thing that was a little annoying with respecing was that you always need to have a certain amount of points to progress, right? You need 3 points in the first node, or 2 points in the first node to access the second node. Then I think it is 3 nodes in the second node to access the third node. Now, if you just want to say you want to change your Hydra for Meteor or for Frozen Orb or something like that, you do actually have to like move points from the dependency up ahead and put it back, and you kind of has to, you know, go back and forth a little bit. An easy thing there would be that it just wouldn't let you apply the changes until the tree had all the requirements done. That would be a nice, like, simple UI thing. It's not a huge deal, but it does get a little annoying to just go back and forth, back and forth. So next, let's talk about the enemy balance. A lot of the, like, smaller monsters and stuff, it's very, very easily dispatched, but a lot of the boss fights are actually giving you a challenge. Some have, like, intricate boss moves. They're very clearly telegraphed. You have to move around a lot, and they did copy-paste some of the boss fights, so there wasn't always that much variety. But the ones that were different were like pretty different and interesting. And in the fights where you are getting swarmed by a lot of ads and stuff, there's usually quite a lot of them. Density is something I definitely want them to address a bit in the game, because sometimes there's loads and that's fun and feels good, and other times there's just extremely little, particularly around larger enemies sometimes. Ultimate skills can feel really awesome. Now, granted, some of them were a little lackluster. I'm referring to, for example, the sorcerer like snake thing. That felt more like a utility skill and not so much as an ultimate. And while the ice skill also felt a little more on the utility side, it was really powerful and made a very big difference in combat. So really excited to see more of these, especially like the Druid and Necro ones. And as the last thing for the good point, regardless of anything else and regardless of the bad points that I'm about to cover next, I had a really good time playing. I'm always going into games not really comparing them instantly to other games, because we're always wired to have favorites and be leaning towards certain ways. So when I go into a new game, I'm just sitting there thinking, Am I having fun? That's the bottom line. That's the only thing that should matter when you're playing a video game. Am I having fun, and is my time well spent? And I had a really good time. I think I played somewhere between 20 and 30 hours this weekend. Had a good time. So, we're gonna cover the bad points next, but for my part, Diablo 4 already seems like something I could enjoy for a few weeks every time it resets. And if this game keeps getting large content updates, and especially if it's even better with the full release, which I'm hoping it will be, seems pretty good. With that being said, there are some obvious issues, and some of these might be released by either fixes between the 2 weekends, or there is a few months until launch, so a lot of these things are very fixable and might even already be addressed in the full version of the game. The class imbalance, which is something I'm especially hoping is only a low level issue, and obviously you can level with friends, so it could be similar to Diablo 2 where yeah, you're a barbarian, you're probably leveling with a Sorc early on, but the class imbalance was crazy. Sorc is magnitude stronger than the other ones, and some of this was just that we hadn't discovered builds yet. For example, we pretty early on found a Thorns build for the Barbarian that was quite strong, and we did find some things with Rogue that was very good as well, but Sorc was still just magnitude stronger than the other two. Not only does it have just extremely good kiting potential, which is very powerful in this game, but it has multiple barriers and even has access to cheat deaths in this early of the game. Like I said earlier, there is very high unavoidable damage, and this was especially rough early on a Barbarian. Before you have things like Thorns, before you have like higher armor and more defense, you're getting absolutely slaughtered. I actually started my Barbarian on softcore just in case, because I had heard so many bad things about the Barbarian and I didn't want to just constantly start over. And I definitely died a few times, but I actually died very early before I even had the option of gaining a barrier defense or anything. And it was just incredibly hard. And at this point, you're always like, you're trying out different things, like what works, and a lot of things I would just run into the monsters, and I'm like, I'm getting murdered here. I've used all my potions, I can't recover, I just have to disengage and run away. Whereas on the Sorc, it was just like, plink, 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 oh, they're XP, plink, plink, oh, more XP, oh, they're dead. Oh, I have health potions, I don't need them, plink, plink, plink. So it was like such a different experience, especially early. And it might be that Barbarian just comes online a lot later, and that's not necessarily the end of the world, but it just felt like such a crazy difference. One issue that, and a lot of these aren't like the end of the world, but I think something that would help Diablo, and especially like if anything is a weaker class, having skill loadouts. So maybe like respiking could be something that's a lot more friendly in Diablo. They're not really going for like insane complexity or insane difficulty anyway, so I don't see like a huge downside between having loadouts. You're about to fight the boss, you go to your single target, more tanky loadout. You're clearing, you go switch back to your like AoE loadout. The next issue, no move only, is something Blizzard for some reason has been incredibly stubborn on, where people have ended up in past games having to use macros, having to have scroll wheel as their like way to move their character and things like that is very, very weird to me. Every single other ARPG usually has a normal functioning move only, and a lot of us were very excited because Diablo 4 in the options lets you have a force move only. But it's done in such an odd way. It's a little hard to describe without you trying it yourself, but as soon as you untick or ungroup the move only, now you have a move only, so mouse button 1 is force move, but now it is only force move, nothing else. That means you can't open doors, you can't pick up items, you can't interact with levers and switches. That's insanity, right? Because normally you want both. Normally we want mouse to be move, pick up items on the ground, and interact with basic shit. But in Diablo 4, it can be that, but then it's also casting your ability, and you're basically losing a skill slot. This was fine on the Sorc because it was so incredibly strong, but you don't always want to give up a skill ability just for basic quality of life, and something I'm absolutely expecting and hoping will be fixed. But that's something I saw, which seems like such a small thing, but it really is a big thing, because it's incredibly frustrating. In Diablo 4, what damage you're receiving can be kind of hard to tell. Outside of a enemy having, you know, fire enchanted, etc. like that, which is labeled, and you do start learning that as you play. There'll be like a symbol below the monster, but it's outside of it being like, you know, a lightning thing or a fire thing, it's not always clear exactly what type of damage things are. Sometimes moves can look a little bit more generic, so having enemies be like either labeled or more visibly clear what they are. You know, like if you see a burning enemy that's on fire and it's casting fire moves, probably on fire, but a lot of things were a little bit harder to tell there. Some enemy skills felt a little weird or not necessarily balanced for every character. So there's a blood priest thing, and it has like a grab. Like it almost feels like, you know, like a Tekken grab or something. Like it just reaches out and grabs you. And sometimes it was like very clearly missing and it just went like bloop, I missed. And another time it just like reached across really far and just like pulls me back and I'm like, what the hell? And stuns and grabs, at least at the levels we were, there wasn't really any counter to break out of them, which on hardcore is very jarring. I would like dodge if it's on cooldown to be able to break out of that. Even a minigame, even if I had to do like some sort of triangle or like anything on screen, like something to break out of being stunned or break out of being grabbed felt weird not to have. I ended up dying to this on my Sork, but apparently it's a lot worse on Barbarians. I was super under-leveled. Sork doesn't actually have an issue with this when it's appropriate leveled. But there is like a stronghold vampire, and it has like this crazy barrage of attacks where you can see here, it is just absolutely shitting out projectiles. Well, it actually does that in melee range too. In a lot of games that have similar things, those attacks just wouldn't work or wouldn't be done while somebody is in melee. This one actually does. So a lot of barbarians were just like standing in melee range, you know, walking around the enemy hitting, and then suddenly, brrr, you're gone, kid. Another thing that was particularly weird for the beta, obviously, Barbarian being showcased at such a power difference was weird, but also the fact that its level 15 quest for the masteries wasn't even doable in the beta. And that made it a little frustrating because it almost feels pointless to test it. It is a very large part, right? Sork basically gets this enchantment thing where you have one skill that'll either automatically go off every now and again by conditions, Blizzard that'll just follow you every now and again, which is cool. And it already, that's why Sork was the most enjoyable, I find, because you're already thinking up all these ideas and like, oh man, that's a cool combo or that's a cool build. Whereas Barbarian, you're just like, man, I guess I'll go swords and everything will kill itself when they hit me. As a testing or hyping people up thing, that failed a little bit. Definitely maining Sork either way, just because I love Sork. But all in all, I had a very good time playing. Actually, a lot of people, I had some of my friends' chats open at the same time. I would see some people that would enter my chat and they would be like, why the fuck is anyone playing this dog shit game, you absolute shills? And then talking to them was pointless because 2 minutes or sometimes 5 minutes later, I would see that same person in another friend's chat. So basically all they're doing is they're going through every Twitch channel, sending a hateful message. And like this sort of like gaming activism is so fucking weird and so crazy. I could never imagine doing that. If I don't like a game, I just don't play it, right? Like the only reason I make review videos to begin with is people keep asking me for my opinion. Very strange to me. Definitely my least favorite part of everything. I think it's just the unhealthy thing here is fans and haters. Just better to be somewhere in the middle. I had a good time. I'm hoping a lot of the issues I have is fixed. The more games we have, the better. I don't think it's going to be something I will main. I see this as being something that I will play for 1 to 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks every launch. And if I get to cycle between like a D4, Last Epoch, and a PoE launch, that sounds amazing. Because regardless of depth of anything else, the first 2 weeks of a game, oh my god, I love resets. I love starting over. Absolutely, so much fun. So really looking forward to that. And not every game has to be the same difficulty or the complexity. So the more games we get, the better. And I do hope Blizzard fixes a lot of the issues. Either way, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Sub if you like it. Let me know your comments down below. But more importantly, try to die less than I do.